You can forget about that. I don't think that ball's come down yet. Made a good lane for Spooner with the backhander. That's nasty. Smack to center, long run. Rottenberg, oh, she caught it. Stop. That surely must be illegal. It's that time of the week again. Here's episode 15 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. If you're new to the show, the intro sound bites are from my favorite highlight clips I've made with my commentary. Planning to get a new one out for you soon. Last week was a good time here on White Noise Sports, with just two focuses, recapping the NBA Finals and exposing the dirty, rotten cheaters that have been popped for betting on their sport. I said I wanted to do a full MLB power rankings, but I'm going to save that for the All-Star break. I realize when people mention the first and second half of the baseball season, they're always referring to pre- and post-break. You can expect a huge influx of baseball at All-Star break time. Remember, I still have to repick for my postseason awards predictions, and I might even give all of my Silver Slugger and Gold Glove choices there. That'll be a marathon, but I do have a guest scheduled. This week, though, I'm going to take on the Oilers' absurd comeback attempt against the Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. Yes, I sat through a whole game from start to finish and tried to learn. They came up just short, of course, but they made history in a few ways. After that, the NBA head coaching carousel continues its wild and probably dangerous spin rate, and one hire in particular has everybody talking. Lastly, this week was the NBA draft. As much as I thought I was done covering basketball for a few months, there are too many potential franchise changers to skip over this year. I'll be covering a few of the most publicized picks in the draft and talk about their scheme and team fits a little bit. Heading into the first segment. All right, hear me out. A 3-0 lead in a best-of-7 series. That is as surefire, as guaranteed as it gets in sports that play series. It takes a miracle to overcome, surely. The Oilers came as close as they could possibly come, but they lost 2-1 in that pivotal Game 7. The list of teams that have ever made the full comeback, that is down 3-0 to win a series, is hilariously short. But of course, like the good little investigator that I am, I'll give it to you anyway. The 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs, yes, during World War II, beat the Red Wings, and it's the only time that the 3-0 comeback has ever happened in the finals. The 1975 Islanders beat the Penguins in the quarterfinals. 2010, the Flyers took down the Bruins in the Eastern Conference semis. And 2014, most recently, the LA Kings over the Sharks in the Western Conference first round. And for the only time ever in MLB history, the 2004 Red Sox also came back down 3-0 to the Yankees in the ALCS. It's never once been done in the NBA, believe it or not. A handful of teams have come back to force a Game 7 but lost. I'm not going to list them all, but just know that even doing that is nigh on impossible. So, how did the Oilers block out all that noise and even come so close? I'm going to start with the kind of stuff that doesn't take too much hockey knowledge to figure out. I have to come back to star power and experience as some of the absolute best predictors of who wins in the postseason. Connor McDavid decided when they had their backs up against the wall that he was just going to be the best player in the world again. People wanted to complain about him not scoring a ton of goals in the latter part of the season, and then that carrying into the playoffs a little bit. Yet, if you had to guess, who do you think led the entire playoffs in points by far with 10 more than anyone else and set a record? The Oilers are the second oldest team in the league with an average age of 30.3 years, only behind the Penguins at, get this, almost 32. This might be the last year that their championship window was open, as McDavid and Luke Draisaitl are some of their only stars under 30. Still, a team like that is never shaken. They never lose faith because they've been everywhere. They've seen and done everything already. What a time it was to capitalize, and they nearly made perhaps the greatest comeback ever. Now, of course, if you don't win schematically, it might not matter how experienced you are. The Oilers only had one power play in Game 7, and they couldn't score on it. Sergei Bobrovsky, the Panthers goalie, finally looked human, at least a little, in Games 4 through 6. His armor was cracked. He was sort of that tired old veteran. People started talking, would he maybe be retiring this offseason? And he had that absolutely tragic first half in Game 5, letting up the 5 goals before getting pulled. Then in Game 7, he put together 23 saves and only let up 1 goal, was named one of the stars of the game, and again dominated against a fantastic offense. The Panthers' defense only let up 2 shots from McDavid and Draisaitl combined. That didn't hurt at all. After the dust settled, Connor McDavid still won the Conn Smythe Trophy. I made the same mistake as so many other people did online, thinking it was just the Finals MVP award at first, but it's the trophy for, quote, the most valuable player to his team in the playoffs. Does it usually go to a member of the team that won the finals? Yeah, of course, but not if that guy records the most assists ever in a playoff run with 34. McDavid's the 6th guy ever to win the trophy and lose the finals. The only other guys that have had more points overall in a playoff run, by the way, are Wayne Gretzky, who might be, the most dominant athlete ever, and Hall of Famer Mario Lemieux. Now, hopefully I've learned a few things about hockey that stick and I can cover it a little bit more and a little bit better next season. I watched a few Red Wings games early on this year when they started so hot, but they're still in the Detroit sports abyss for now, with the second longest playoff drought in the league. It feels amazing to say that the Lions are no longer there, that they've pulled themselves out and are kind of putting the city on their shoulders, if you will. Still, I think hockey's a great sport, but it'll take a lot of time for me to really get comfortable with it the way that I am with other sports. I also sort of wish the national media coverage and the money in it was a little bit more on par with the MLB, the NBA, and the NFL. I'm just not sure that's ever going to happen. Such is life. It was an all-time epic series between the Panthers and Oilers, and even if you think the ending was a little bit anticlimactic, I'm glad to have picked such a good time to get into hockey, to take an interest in it. Moments like this, they're just good for all of sports. Now, next segment, I'm sure you'll scarcely believe it. The Los Angeles Lakers are making headlines right as the confetti from the parades is still being swept up in Boston. I swear they're normally so good at avoiding distractions and staying out of the drama till the season hits. Now, I thought their biggest storyline this offseason would be LeBron likely opting out of his current deal and forcing them to draft his son Bronny if they want to keep him. Obviously, more on that later. That is, until they went out and hired ESPN lead analyst JJ Redick as their head coach. It's his first formal coaching job anywhere, and it just happens to be with the second most valuable NBA franchise and one of the most valuable sports teams on earth. His contract is 4 years with a value undisclosed, although I would be very interested to know. Let me start with the obvious in evaluating the JJ Redick deal. Was the Lakers' prior head coach, Darvin Ham, the problem or the thing holding them back? The reason that they lost in the playoffs the last 2 years against the Nuggets? Absolutely not. They made plenty of acquisitions. They traded Russell Westbrook away and unloaded that contract. They got great production and health from LeBron and Anthony Davis this year. Hold on, let me knock on wood. They had all the names, all the talent on paper, all the necessary experience. They've just never had the depth or the chemistry since LeBron's been there, besides maybe that bubble team in 2020 that won the championship. It's hard not to have team chemistry, by the way, when you're stuck in the same place 24/7. Even I've been there, done that. Now, Darvin Ham had 2 years left on his contract at what I believe was $5 million a year, and they had just won 47 games this regular season in the tightest Western Conference race in history by far. A couple years ago when Darvin took over, they just scraped their way into the playoffs, but they made it to the Western Conference Finals. If they paid JJ Redick more than Darvin Ham, then there is absolutely no such thing as meritocracy. That whole idea is just dead in the NBA then. I don't care if JJ ends up being one of the best young coaches ever, which I fully do not expect, by the way. He is utterly unproven, and that should matter. So here are some of the numbers on JJ Redick, the player. He was a good player in his own right. Not a Hall of Famer or even all-star good, but that kind of he'll be remembered fondly in 10 years good. He's the all-time leading scorer for Duke basketball, National Player of the Year in 2006, 3-time All-American, all that. So it was no shock that he went on to be a first-round pick. He was drafted 11th overall by the Magic and played until 2021. He appeared in 31 games for the Pelicans and 13 more for the Mavericks in that last year. He was never a big star, averaged a little under 13 points a game, and he was also criticized quite ruthlessly, but fairly in my opinion, for his lack of defensive effort. His role was an outstanding three-point shooter and a very good free throw shooter. With mostly just those skills and the veteran leadership, it helped him earn $118 million over the course of his career. One more interesting tidbit about JJ Redick: he's a podcaster and a YouTuber in addition to being the ESPN lead analyst, and he started podcasting in season during his career. I'm not saying I want to be like him, But that does sound awfully familiar, and I respect him a ton on the creative side. I wish I would have had a stronger media presence while I was playing college football, because I could have been a ton of really easy content. Now, for the big concern I have about J.J. Redick, the coach. Will he be able to coach physicality, post presence, and focus on both ends of the floor? Something that the Lakers desperately need. He's taken over a team that's maybe average at best defensively, and they're incredibly inconsistent with those traits I mentioned. Offensively, I think they're really active, and they're tough enough. They were second in free throws taken, and they had the biggest free throw margin in the league by far. Defensively, they committed the fewest fouls by far, and you might think that's a good thing, but not necessarily when they're just getting blown by or they're not contesting shots. Beyond Anthony Davis and LeBron, most of the Lakers' key contributors were defensive liabilities. Typically, I'd think that the center position is extinct and that the 7-foot-plus bulldozers are all out of a job and they're sort of archaic, but I really changed my mind on that when watching this year's March Madness tournament. I'll segue right into some of the results from the NBA draft from this Wednesday and Thursday night. It was a really fascinating field, and it was pretty cool to see back-to-back guys from outside the U.S. go 1 and 2 again. The Atlanta Hawks were on the clock first, and they took Zachary Rizaché from France. Then the Wizards took Alex Sarr, the 7-foot Frenchman that played last year in Australia. The Pistons were picking 5th, despite having finished 14 and 68. I'm not going to go too deep on the draft lottery. Here's everything I'll say about it. It's terrible. It needs to be abolished and replaced by something else quickly, and I'll move on. Anyway, the Pistons' pick was Ron Holland III. He was the high school player of the year in 2022, but then chose to go to the G League over going to college this past year. He only played 14 games and then ruptured a tendon in his thumb, and although everyone likes 6'8" forwards that can score, he shot under 25% from 3. Ew. Plus his defense is gonna need work. I see this as probably the biggest risk of the whole first round. There's always two schools of thought around really awful teams. You either take the safe options and you slowly build around them until you can kind of field a competent team, or you swing for the fences and you hope to find a future Hall of Famer. UConn's Donovan Clingan is another 7-footer, and he was taken at 7 by the Trailblazers. They're another team that has an extremely long way to go to be competitive at all, really. So a safe pick, I think, is a really good call for them. Clingan is 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan, weighs about 280 pounds, blocked over 2.2 shots a game, and he was only playing something like 22 minutes a game at UConn. More than any of that, he's just downright scary looking and mean. We've been taught that today's centers shoot threes, and they have skinny arms and legs, and they're just taller forwards, but I love this kind of counterculture, and I hope it continues. Portland's probably the only team in the league, off the top of my head, that has 4 centers currently rostered, but that certainly might change before the season starts, because if you ask me, Clingan has to get minutes right away. He's just that good. Purdue's Zach Edey went 9th overall to the Grizzlies. I thought he would be on the board a lot later and be a perfect fit for the Lakers probably at 17. Edey is instantly one of the largest NBA players all time. If his conditioning isn't great though and he doesn't score much, this will end up being a huge reach. This pick is just plain ignoring every real problem that they have. The Grizzlies are above average in every way defensively, except for rebounding by a little bit, and they were dead last in scoring and field goal percentage. I understand a lot of that is with no Ja Morant, but still, you didn't want a scorer? You don't think you need a scorer? This is a pick where even if Edey's pretty solid, it could still cost somebody a job. The risk is low-ish, and the expectations for the Grizzlies are even lower, but I failed to see how they can defend this pick to the fans, the front office, the national media, really anybody. The Lakers went with Dalton Knecht from Tennessee at 17. He was one of those funny cases of a guy who was kind of looked at as too small coming out of high school, but then he grew 5 inches while playing JUCO. Now, if you look at him, he's a guard with really pretty good size at almost 6'6", 205 pounds. He is one of the oldest guys in the draft, having transferred twice and played 5 full years in college. His last year was a huge one for his draft stock. 21.7 points a game. He shot 40% from 3 and started every game for Tennessee on their way to the Elite Eight. You can never score enough points in the NBA anymore. So maybe we'll see sort of, call it the Los Angeles Pacers a bit on offense. That is, they might pick up their pace of play less in the half court, and make every game a race to 130 points. Indiana really pulled it off well this year, so I can't discredit the idea. If Zach Edey was still on the board, I still think he would have been the best fit for them. Just imagine 7'4", 300 pounds. We know, of course, that Anthony Davis is awesome as a center when he actually plays there, and any other Lakers bigs are decidedly not awesome. They could have cut or traded Rui Hachimura, and they still might. It looks like they're going to embrace getting smaller and quicker, and that should lead to them scoring even more points. The biggest draft news in years, though, comes at pick 55 in the second round, with the Lakers taking LeBron James Jr., a.k.a. Bronny. Le GM just made it happen. We had all heard the claim that LeBron wanted to play a year with his son. The Lakers are now the winners of the semi-annual LeBron James sweepstakes because of it. Now, we have to consider Bronny as a player, or at least I think we should. NBA front offices might not feel that because they just sort of saw the golden egg. Bronny had a cardiac arrest just under a year ago. I'm sure you've heard. No doubt he's been closely monitored, and there's a reason he was cleared to play basketball again, right? But still, insanely scary situation. Bronny went on to play his freshman year at USC, putting in about 5 points and 3 rebounds a game in under 20 minutes a game. He also stands 6'2" and 210 pounds. That caused a lot of people on the internet to talk about, his combine stats look more like he's getting ready for the NFL combine. I think we need to chill on that, right? Is he genetically blessed? Yes, by the nature of being LeBron James Jr. Is he at the level of his dad athletically? Yeah, obviously not, but maybe no one is or has ever been. Do the numbers that he put up in college typically indicate a guy that's going to get drafted? Absolutely not, if we're all honest. But there are so many other factors at play here. Consider the contract LeBron's eligible to sign. As I understand it, it's 3 years and $162 million. That simply cannot be allowed to happen, but it might anyway. LeBron would be 42 years old at the end of that point. That's ridiculous enough on its own. The NBA and NFL both need to start rethinking salary cap, by the way. They need to limit the percentage of cap that they're allowed to pay one player. Side note, this has actually been suggested among NFL owners already, but just for quarterbacks, seeing as those deals have really outpaced the growth of other positions. I've heard numbers tossed around for what Luka Doncic might make on his next Supermax deal, and that could hit almost $100 million a year. That just doesn't even make sense. There has to be some end to this madness, please. I still struggle to see the fit with Bronny on the Lakers. Would, for example, Bronny start over D'Angelo Russell at point guard? And then what do you do with Austin Reeves? Does Reeves become a 2-guard? LeBron have to play a 3? I really don't know what the plan is. How much do you expect him to play as a rookie anyway? It should be very little, right? Even if the Lakers signed Bronny out of sheer nepotism, they get LeBron James back. Their championship window should still be open, but it always comes down to, in the Western Conference, can they beat Denver? I don't think that the Bronny deal moves the needle that much. Hate to say it. And so the well runs dry in episode 15. Just kidding. I love the 24-hour sports news cycle because I just never feel like there's nothing to talk about. I didn't even get to some of the big remaining NFL free agents and where they might end up. The awesome head-to-head matchup recently between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. There's other things like the collapse of regional sports networks as the leagues want to make everything national. There was the NFL having to pay $4.7 billion in damages over that whole Sunday ticket debacle. There was even that awesome College World Series final between Tennessee and Texas A&M. Some of these I'll definitely get to at some point because they really interest me, and some of them will just float by in the wind, but I try to follow and stay up on top of everything that I can. You, dear listener, you'll just have to keep coming back and listening week after week, or you can always feel free to hit me on my socials if you have a good idea for me. Instagram and TikTok, at The Voice of Tanner. Connect on LinkedIn if you're into that kind of thing. And, of course, leave a like, comment, and share. This has been episode 15 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me. And that ball is launched. You can't forget about that. I don't think that ball's come down yet. Made a good lane for Spooner with the backhander. That's nasty. Smack to center, long run. Rottenberg, oh, she caught it. Stop. That surely must be illegal.